Hello, we're live. I'm so excited here. Welcome, Christina.
Hi, Ellen. Great to see you again.
Good to see you. We are back for number 3 of our 4-part editing essentials, and we want to thank everyone for joining us today. Let me see if I can turn on the comments. Everyone can start telling us if they can hear us, see us, where you're from, what you're looking for, and I'm going to encourage you to leave any questions, throw those up. We'll go through this. Christina and I like to be pretty relaxed and answer questions as we go. So please feel free to pop in and ask those questions. Meanwhile, I do want to remind you to follow us on YouTube, because that's how you find out what all is going on. And of course, those of you who have joined us from Eventbrite, please make sure you're following both firstediting.com and fictionary.co, so that you can keep up to date on all of our information. Today, we're talking about editing essentials for fiction, and we're doing the 10 essential scene edits. So we're going to be working through that. Christina, hello.
I know, very exciting. And what's fun here is the names all on the side here. I recognize a lot of them because of being from, previous webinars or Fictionary subscribers. It's super nice to see familiar names. I like that. That just relaxes me, makes me feel better about just coming out here and doing this.
Oh, this is good. And so we have coming to us today, let's see here, we have Spain, Mark, me too. I'm in the Canary Islands. We have Fredonia, New York, Tipton, Indiana, New York, many. So drop them in there. We'll start talking about them. We've got slides all prepared for you today to go through our 10 sections. And I just want to remind you that, what we're talking about today, the reason why we're doing editing essentials is that this is, what we as professional editors do behind the scenes. So if you learn how to do this yourself, it means you're going to get a better return on your investment for editing. It also means that you might be able to skip developmental editing from a professional editor and go straight to line editing. So it just helps us determine. But most importantly, I think, Christine, what we agree on is using the same lingo, the same vocabulary, the same understandings. I just can't get over how important that is.
I know for me as a starting author, I didn't know what a lot of the terms meant. And when I was talking to anybody in the business, whether it be an agent I wanted or a publisher, an editor, I really struggled. So, this gives everybody a way to talk in the same language and know the terms and know what you're looking for. And so I think it's really important.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like, I've been in this business for so long, and yet still I hear proofreading and copy editing and editing all thrown around as if they're the same words and they mean the same things when they don't. So, to get the basics and to really understand, it really helps your editor step up and fulfill what you need here. So again, this is behind the scenes, showing you what we do, and so that you can do it yourself here. So Ontario, Kansas City, KC, woohoo! Palm Bay, Florida, both homes there, Kansas and Florida. Escondido, California. So lots. And Christina, you're coming to us from
Kingston, Ontario, where I see Paul is from. I've seen Paul on these before too. I think we've actually emailed each other. So I think I know exactly what island he lives on near Kingston. Not
oh my goodness.
You know what I
mean? All right. Okay, and I do want to remind you, we will send out a free replay so you can watch us later. If you have to leave early, it's no problem. We'll have that for you. And follow us on Eventbrite, and we will get started on today is basically our, let's see, how do I turn off this ticker? Your 10 scenes and 10 basic steps, or your scenes in 10 basic steps. Christina likes number 10, this series.
This series is the top 10 of everything.
So to get us started, I just want to talk about why we're assessing your scene, and why that's so important. And we were discussing behind the scenes here. Oh, how funny, behind the scenes of scenes, that, the big thing is that right now you've got so much competition out there, and you're writing these books, and you've got to really have every single building block needs to be essential. It needs to be important. It needs to be engaging, and it needs to be super strong. And the building blocks of your writing are the scenes, and they're there, and they need to fit in your overall strategic plan of not only your book and your story arc, but your series. And I was in a conference 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about, when you get a publisher or an agent, they expect you to have 3-4 books lined up, because that allows them to sell. They know they've got the first one, the second one, you're hooking them in, and they know that the average author can't produce that on demand. So it needs to be already prepped and ready to go when they publish you. I mean, you have experience with that, Christina.
I do. And I didn't get an agent until I had 3 books written, and then followed that on with a publisher. But I'm really happy that I did all 3 books, because working through the editor experience and also the agent experience, changes that were recommended in book 3, I had to do in book 1. And so you can then get the whole series working together, that it seems like a lot of work, but you can really, really get your series tight if you know the end of your series. And a small example is if you're looking at the story arc, which we covered last week, in a series versus you've got your story arc for each book. Well, the same kind of form applies to the whole series. So your inciting incident in book 1 should be a mirror of your climax in book 3. And then you can't know that until you've written that climax. And the climax of book 3, if it's the end of your series, has to answer the main story question that came out in book 1. And so if you then look back and go, ooh, I actually have the wrong inciting incident, or my climax is right in a different book, 2 books away from each other, you can fix that ahead of time. And the other beautiful thing is you can time it when you want to release your books. And so you can put out your book and you watch as your sales go. And when it starts to dwindle off a little bit, put your next one out. And you can do it so they play off of each other. And you can do that whole excitement thing of, if you like my first book, my next book is coming in 2 months, or whatever you choose. And there's a lot of value in this series thing.
Right. And people just need to understand that everything is strategic now. Everything. And the reason why we're here today and talking about this is because we're using software that allows us to be strategic, allows us to fulfill those mandatory pieces and be objective and comprehensive, and yet still human, which is exciting. One of the things I also want to talk about that we had mentioned earlier was that Amazon Vella. We were kind of chatting about that, and tell us a little bit about this, Christina, because I know it's all about the scenes.
Yeah,
it's super exciting.
So it's not that new. It's been out for 9 months or something, but basically, and I don't know the exact details, so don't quote me on this, but basically what Amazon is saying is put up your first scenes for 3 scenes for free. People read it. And then if they want to read more, they pay per scene. So, say somebody pays 70 cents a scene, you get 40 cents as the author. Mm-hmm. What it means, though, is every scene has to be great. Every scene has to have an entry and exit hook. And it becomes really, really important if you think about someone's making a decision, not just to put your book down at the end of a scene, which we all deal with. Now it's, do I want to invest another 70 cents to read the next piece of the book? And so it becomes extremely important to think about your overall story in scenes. And technology is going to continue to change on us. And as authors, we have to continue to change and think about how we're, it's almost a little bit like, how are we formatting the story to meet that new technology thing that's coming along? That's an opportunity for all of us. And I believe the way that Amazon has done it is that if you actually sell per scene, you end up making a little bit more money than you would if you sold the whole book at once.
Smart. And I mean, and it's a good test way to kind of get in there and see how successful it is. But I don't know. You really want to succeed first, because I think you get one shot, and you better do it right. So we're going to talk about those 10 scenes. We do have handouts. We'll send those to you. And this is the 3rd part of 4 in the editing essentials. So I do want to remind you of that today. So go and check out Amazon Vella and that. and make sure that you work for that. I do want to mention that what we're talking about today with the scene evaluation, it works for narratives, and that means nonfiction and memoirs also, as long as you're telling a story. And this is me, I'm going to say this, but if you are writing a nonfiction book, you need to be using stories anyhow. That's the best way to make your point. It's the best way to be remembered. It's the best way for people to remember what you said. And so regardless, unless it's a purely instructional kind of situation, if you're using these nonfictions for inspiration, motivation, and what, 70% of education, then you really need to go ahead and use a scene evaluation. You need to make sure that you have these 10 and more. We've got 38 story elements that we talk about quite a bit. But today we're going to be talking about the scene. So it's pretty exciting. And you can plug this into Storyteller, or you can have your editors evaluating it from this point. So
yes, let me just give one example of that. So if anyone wants to see how to do narrative nonfiction, take a look at the opening scene. You can get your free sample on wherever you get your free samples from of good God, I just forgot the name of the book. Billy Beane, the baseball player, Moneyball. Sorry.
Moneyball, yeah.
Take a look at Moneyball, because the opening scene in that starts with an entry hook. It's got a narrator talking about a protagonist. It's got a goal. It's got conflict. It's got an exit hook. It has all of these things your scene needs. And if you read through the rest of the book, so I have zero interest in baseball, and I got curious about this book because it's a narrative nonfiction and was pitched into a movie, has done extremely well. And I thought, okay, so what's the deal there? And now I'm captured reading the book. Originally, I was just going to read the first piece, and then I actually bought the printed copy so I can read the whole book, because it's such a good story about this guy, Billy Beane, who's a real character and has this story that he went through with this baseball team. So it's a great example. If you want to look at something to see how to write narrative nonfiction, it's a really good one to have a look at.
Right. I mean, so the basics that we're going to talk about today are, that scenes are so essential on so many different ways, and they are going to strengthen and amplify everything that you're doing. So without further ado, a nice cliche there, we will start with, I've got some nice slides here. Bing. So behind the scenes here, let me see if I can remind that when we're doing this, we're talking about professional developmental story editing. This is what the editors do behind the scene. The more you know, the better you get. You will either have a developmental editor or a line editor, but at some point you'll be using an editor. So you can either have it done for you and from the very beginning, but I would honestly encourage you, no matter what, to always learn as much as you can. And most writers do. I mean, they're just natural learners and readers, and they love to understand it. But, this is the kind of training we have in the background, and this is how we're looking at what we're doing here. So let me move along. Okay, so here's our top 10 scene editing steps. I'm Christina. I'm going to let you lead us through.
Perfect. I'm just going to take the blur off there. I feel like I'm really blurry. Is that better?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like you're behind a screen.
It's funny. I just took that blur. So anyway, well, I'm blurry. Everybody knows what I look like already.
You're blurry, but your books are clear. Doesn't it look like it?
I don't know. Okay. Anyway, beside the point, as long as people can read the charts, doesn't matter that I'm blurred out. We'll just call it the makeup thing. All right.
Okay.
So everybody knows. So people who've already been on there, you've heard me talk about the value of scene naming. And I just want to point out, so if you're self-editing, you should be naming your scene in each 3 words or less, or 4, but a small thing so you know what the scene is about, right? If you're editing somebody else's book, it's huge value to the writer if you name a scene for them, and then they look at the scene name and go, why would they name it that? It means your perception as an editor was the scene was about topic A, but their perception as a writer is it's about topic B. And it's really, really valuable to the writer to know what an editor is going to show them. And a story editor will do this for you, that they name every scene as they're going through, because for them too, it helps them do all of the following things. Click to Ellen.
Clicking?
Didn't go anywhere.
No, we're not. No, I'm clicking. I'm here. I'm on the wrong page to click. There you go.
Okay. So the most important thing, it means either you know what the scene is about as the writer, but the editor also thinks they know what the scene is about, and that's why they're naming the scene. And also for both people, it gives you an after draft outline, which becomes really important if you don't want to waste time, that you want to see your story. And as you move scenes around, when you're looking at the big picture of your story, you can do that. It also gives you that after draft outline. So you just use it as a reference. If you edit, I want to go to what was that scene where the guy, killed her or whatever. You can find it really quickly and go edit that scene. It helps you define the purpose of a scene. If you can't name it, it could be that it doesn't have a purpose. And if it doesn't have a purpose, you have to ask, why is it in the scene? So the number two thing we're going to talk about is purpose of scene.
Exactly. So as you're going through these, you need to make sure that you knew what you're doing. So purpose of each scene is it's got to have a reason for existing. If it's not, doesn't have a purpose, if it doesn't contribute, then it is taking away. It's weighing down your story. It's distracting. It's doing things that it shouldn't be. Doesn't mean it wasn't a great piece of literature that you wrote or a scene that you wrote. It just means that it's not doing what it should be doing right now. So the editor is looking at this and saying, well, why do you have this scene in your story? And why is it here at this time? What is it contributing to the overall story arc? What is it contributing to the character? How is it, engaging your reader? And I think that's the one that we need to talk about most is, is everything that you're contributing there bringing the reader in and having them care about and get involved with the characters that you have there. And then I noticed here you have too many purposes, which of course, it should have one and just focus, laser sharp there. Let's see. So moving along to part 3, Christina, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so just click over to the next chart and we'll talk about the point of view character. So the point of view is all it is the character whose eyes the reader are experiencing the scene from. And so when you think about it, if the point of view character can see something, hear something, smell something, touch something, you can show that in a scene. If they can't, as the character, then they can't know about it. You can't know that something is happening around you if you have no sense of it. And so what I always recommend to people is your point of view is a promise to your readers. This is how they're going to experience the story. This is the character they're going to relate most to for that scene. And so until you have full control over a scene or over point of view, and you know how to write strong point of view and keep it, I recommend don't head hop. And head hop just means you're changing point of view within a scene. Lots of writers do it. Nora Roberts is one. Louise Penny's another, but they are very experienced writers and they know how to do it. When you're writing omniscient, it's still the same thing. So when you're omniscient, you still have a narrator point of view, that it's not just all over the place. You're still strategically showing your reader a perspective of that scene. So omniscient means all seeing, but it doesn't mean you can show everything at the same time. You have to make a conscious choice that you're in control of it. Otherwise, it's confusing. And if it's not confusing, then you have to use a lot of extra words to make the transition smooth. And you have to then decide, are those extra words worth it? Or would it be better to stay in the same point of view? Or would it be better to start a new scene? And as soon as you add extra words, you're slowing the pacing, which may be something you want to do at that point of your story. Great. But if it's not, then don't use those extra words to flip the point of view around.
So when you're doing this, you're going from the point of view character. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, you go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
I'm running the technology here. So, so the point of view character is basically your protagonist or whoever is giving the whole story at this point. So one of the great parts and a wonderful tool that we gain from using this software is that, as an editor, we can easily see your where your characters are included in every scene, how much time they're getting for that in terms of word count, how heavy that is, how long each scene is. So it allows us to determine the balance, allows us to see that it's actually there. And if you have the key scenes of, say, your story arc, and your protagonist is missing, then you got to question what's going on there. There's certain things that we can look for quite quickly, and you got to make sure that the person who you say is your hero actually has the most scenes, and they're involved in the key scenes that are there. So it's really, really important to keep it balanced. Right. So moving along, now we're getting to number 5.
That was actually all number 3. So now we're on number 4, the point of view character goal.
Oh, shoot. Sorry.
That's okay. Keep going.
All right. Keeping it going. Point of view goal.
Yeah. So here, if you think about what your point of view character is doing, they have to be trying to achieve something, and that's the goal for the scene. They're going to have an overall goal for the story. So solve the murder, find the secret treasure, or whatever. But, there's an overall goal. But they're also going to have a goal in every single scene. And if there isn't a goal, you have to ask yourself, what are they doing? It's probably nothing. And then you got to evaluate, do I actually need this scene? A character can have their external goal, which typically changes every scene, or it might stretch over a few scenes in a row. Escape from the crumbling building could take a few scenes, and that's their external goal. The internal goal is what they need to fix as their character. And this one, it could be the same internal goal across the entire novel, or it could switch partway through the novel that, say I'm an agoraphobic and I'm afraid to leave the house. Well, maybe my goal is just to get to the hallway. And if I can do that, that's fantastic. But once I achieve that, maybe I could make it to a store, or maybe I could, go the next step and go to a movie or something. But so the internal goal, they can slowly fix their inner flaw, and then their goal might change a little bit, but don't feel like you have to have a different internal goal for every scene. What both of them have to do is relate to the plot. So if you refer back to your blurb, in every single scene, you're looking at that goal and go, okay, is this bringing me closer or farther from achieving this goal? And it has to have consequences. And by that, I mean, if the character achieves their goal, great. But what consequences mean is, what if they don't? So it doesn't mean they don't achieve the goal. It's just, what if they don't? You need to know something bad is going to happen. And that creates tension for the reader, that they don't know at the beginning of the scene the character is going to achieve it or not. But if they don't, they know it's going to hurt the character. And then there you have tension in your story, in the scene.
Exactly. Moving along.
So we'll just continue with point of view goal here. So the sneaky things. When you look, and be honest with yourself when you're evaluating this. It's easier for an editor to be honest, to go, well, I can't figure out what the goal is here, so there isn't a goal. So you need to make sure the goal meets all the criteria we just talked about. And you can ask yourself those questions. Is there a consequence if they fail? And if there isn't, then really there's no goal. If there's too many goals, the scene's unfocused and the reader's distracted and doesn't really know what to cheer for. So it's not as exciting and engaging for the reader. If the goal is inconsistent with the character's personality, that's a flag to the reader that the writer's not in full control over what they're putting in the scene. As we talked about, no consequences. And here is one, if the goal is achieved too easily. And this one is sneaky. I know, Joelle, and your editors have seen this lots of times, where, you think it's suspenseful because at the beginning of the scene, there's this goal, but by the end of the scene, the character gets it. Okay, that's fine. But then it happens in the next scene, and then the next, and then the next. And then you think, well, this character gets everything they want. There's nothing difficult here. I'm bored as the reader. So you really want to watch that. More often than not, the character doesn't actually achieve their goal. They get part of it or a little closer to it. Can't achieve it all the time, because that's kind of dull.
Exactly. And it is frustrating. I mean, think about all those people in life who never have any troubles.
Well, I don't know, but that's okay.
No, but so it's very important. And then we're going to talk about how you get into and out of every scene. And so it's really, really important that we're looking at these. So the next part would be our scene entry hook. sorry, I'm trying to get over my other screen here. So the entry hook is how you bring them into the scene, and the exit hook, there's entry and exit here, is it's how to get them to read the next one. So it's basically leaving them at the door to the next chapter, and they must open it. They want to. It's the soap opera effect, where you leave them on the cliffhanger and they can't stop. I think it's the basis of all of Netflix now, the binge watching. You can't stop because then they just left you somewhere and you think, but what happens? And every time I even now, I mean, things that I think, oh, it's just history, but I'm thinking, well, I know what happens, but still I want to see it. And I'm watching again and again. So it's very, very important. And they help the whole story flow. And it's important that you balance the pacing. I know we can't have everything be super adventure. We still need to have points where we can breathe and get caught up on other factors that are included there, our subplots and things. But it's so important to see that you have an entry hook and an exit hook. But not only that, but that they're varied, that they you're not using the same one every time. If you're just driving at full force, it can be exhausting. And if you're, leaving them in the same cliffhanger every time, it can be a little, okay, again, really? Okay. So it's really important to deal with these as we go. Let's see here. So entry hook, you have here, kicking off a new scene. So starting a new media res.
In media res, that just goes right in the middle of the action. It's just, you're going.
Yeah, exactly. And also the foreshadowing, the trouble, what's possible here. I always love to think of these a little bit more when it's writing, but it's also the music. Okay, something's about to happen. How do I know? What is there a thought here? There's, if you mention an object in the background or a person has entered the room, then they should be important and they should create some tension or some conflict or some worry or concern there. And you're using that all, again, how you're using your dialogue or even your internal monologues. How is that placing us in there and getting us involved in what's happening in that scene? And the scene, again, is connecting to the overall story arc, when the overall story arc is connecting to your overall series. And you're putting all these together. So everything has a purpose. And you should be, if you're getting questions there, again, what happens this? What, I never thought about that. I had no idea. These kind of situations. And you want to do it all succinctly. You don't want to spend too much time describing it. You want to show. You don't want to tell it, but you want to show it immediately. How was their physical reaction to something there? How was it involved? Anything to contribute there?
Keep going. You're good.
Keep going. I'm keeping going. So now we're on to our scene location. Oh, there we go. Christina.
Okay, so this is settings. Settings. So settings includes everything, including location, as well as your objects, your senses, the weather, that sort of thing. Location. And what I want to talk about here is location is just where the scene plays out. That's it. And it's one of my favorite elements because it can do so much for your story. And when you start thinking hard about where is this scene taking place, you can get really creative with it. Doesn't matter what type of book you're writing, you can get creative with location. And it will make a difference between a boring and exciting scene. And I think I have one more chart here, Joellen, I want to talk about behind this for emotional impact. I put it setting issues. Okay. So just before I talk about this one, I just want to talk about when you're choosing a location, ask yourself, is it the best place for emotional impact? And this is where, for me, it just sparks it up that you think, I'm just casually in a coffee shop like every other scene. Where else could we be? Like, are people trapped in an elevator? Are they on a ski lift? Where could they be where they can't get away from each other if they're having a fight? That kind of thing. So you can start bringing in creative elements. The problem with settings is there can be too much or too little description. I tend to under describe, and my editor always tells me you need to put a little bit more in here. But other people tend to over describe. And so You know you're over describing when you've, say, a character walks into a room and you've put everything in there, but not told the reader why, or shown the reader even better, why those objects are important to the character. So is there a reason, the wallpaper is red, and maybe that brings back a really traumatic memory for the character. And so therefore you could do the wallpaper's red in a memory instead of just too much description about it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's unclear where the scene is taking place, your reader's lost and gets frustrated. So you need to be clear early on where the character is, unless on purpose the character is lost, and it should be unclear. If the description of the setting is not consistent with the point of view character, again, if they describe something, and I always use the cat dog thing. I'm a total dog person. And so I see a dog and I look right over, oh, it's a dog. But if a cat walks by, I don't notice it. So me as a character, if I notice a cat, that's odd. So it shouldn't be in my scene. If it's cliche, like an argument in a coffee shop, or if it's repetitive, like you're just going back to that coffee shop over and over again because it's a habit, have them go somewhere else where one of the characters is uncomfortable in the spot. And so you can give one of them an advantage and one a disadvantage and add more tension to the scene.
Yeah, of course, of course. All right, moving along. Let's see here. We're going to go to our next part, which is, oh, come on. There we go. Opening types and closing types, which are kind of coming together. So we'll step onto these next ones. And I love this, again, it's the variety and making sure that they do this, because sometimes I think one of the great parts of using the system and this method of a checklist and being comprehensive is that you can see your weaknesses, your little points where you get stuck, and where you do it and you don't even realize it. And that's why it's so important for, an editor can do it for you. But if you're doing this, if you're doing a self-editing round before this, you start to see your own slip ups. You get to understand where your weaknesses are, and you also understand where you're really good. And then you can apply this to other areas. So when you have the dialogue, a thought, action, description, these are different ways of entering into the opening of the scene. And don't touch my dog, Susan said. Susan said, don't touch my dog. So how you're presenting that, what are we referring to here?
Oh, here, all this means is if the first line is, don't touch my dog, Susan said, or Susan said, don't touch my dog, that's dialogue. It doesn't matter that Susan said is at the beginning. It's still considered opening the scene with dialogue. And so you don't want to assume because you flip the sentence around, it's not repetitive opening too many scenes in a row with dialogue. It's still counts as dialogue. That's it.
Exactly. And the thoughts and going into their internal thoughts, letting us see what they're thinking, what they're doing. Since Lance didn't like personal messages left on the cell, Shannon wrote a note telling him she was headed to Toronto for the weekend. So it's a thought there that he doesn't like personal messages, but we know what's going on there. So it's a combination. But again, we're going to identify that and we know, okay, now you used it this time in this scene, but have you used it in the other scenes the same way? Or have you diversified it and you've got other things? Does the next scene start off with an action? Because if we're thinking all the time, it gets a little heavy. If we're talking all the time, we need interaction between things. So the action is Jake scrambled forward and pulled Shannon's tether. Perfect. We know exactly what's happening. Something's happened, and we're taking off there. And lastly, the description, again, sun rose over the Atlantic and the low angled rays bounced off capping waves. The sailor in you.
I know. Well,
and again, it also applies for the closing types. Again, you're looking at the dialogues, the thoughts, the actions, and the descriptions. So you're identifying and you're shaking it up. You can't have the same in and out, and also using that in combination with your hooks. It's very, very important. So you can go through and see how many times you've used each of these, and then if necessary, move them around. And if you're not sure, if this is something where you're a little confused or you're not really sure if you're doing it right, then it's a great point to point out to your editor and just ask them. Because for them, they're just going through it. But if you bring it up to them, they'll know, okay, yeah, they wanted me to check on that. By the way, I did notice that here, it would be so much more interesting to flip this around. Or, instead of saying, because they can give you those suggestions. They may not write it for you, but they'll definitely say, this could be an action. And it would be so much more interesting, and you could really engage them, and it ties in with your, with your exit and your entry and all these other things. So it really is important to work together, because they're not independent pieces that you can tick off the box and it's done. It's how they play together. Are you using these to create that overall strength that we're talking about?
So just before you go, I just want to say, can you bounce back to that chart? So thought is an interesting one to end. And so I gave 2 examples here. And the first example is close point of view. So Wave slapped her face, get a grip, pull yourself up. This is a scene that's written really tight in point of view. And so literally she's left hanging off a boat at this point, and everything is super immediate, super fast. Or if you want to slow it down a little bit, get a grip and pull yourself up, she thought. So now we're a little bit distant from the character, and you might have a reason for wanting to do this. The second one is slower pace and more distant. The first one, as a closing type, is, it maps right into an exit hook and very immediate and close personal with the character, and it brings the reader right there. So when you're doing these, pay attention to the little details of how you're using thought, for example.
Exactly. Very well done. Let me get over to my other screen. Oh, there we are. All right. So this brings us to tension and conflict. Christina, lead the way.
Yes. So every scene has to have tension. And even if you're writing a slower based character driven book, you still have to have some kind of tension. So tension is the expectation something bad is going to happen. Conflict is the bad actually happening. So there's that physical fight. So the tension is, you think 2 characters are going to fight, but you're not sure and it's not happening, but you're worried about it. That's tension. When they're actually physically punching themselves, then it's conflict. So you don't necessarily have to have conflict in every scene, but you do need tension. And tension only works if the reader cares about the character. And this is where you're using your point of view and giving your protagonist enough point of view scenes that the reader has enough time to actually get to care about the character. And then they're going to have tension. So if they don't care about the character's goal for the scene, they won't feel tension because of that. So all of these elements link back into each other and are used together. So when you're looking for the tension, is there a goal? Is there consequences if it doesn't happen? Does the reader understand the character and their motivations? Okay, then there's probably tension. But if any of those things aren't happening, then there's not.
Exactly. So we have our ending a scene and we have the exit hooks. That's our 10th one here. Pull this up. And basically we're looking, during the story edit, we're checking all the hooks. We're looking, as I mentioned before, the cliffhangers, the unanswered questions. It's really a soap opera effect. You want to make them eager to get to the next chapter. Or if you finish the book, eager to get to the next book in the series or a next book by you, even if you don't have a series for that particular character or that series, that they like the way that you write. They want to go on not just to the genre, but to you as a writer, that they understand and they love you and they follow you. So these are very important, and you want to keep them going again and again, because they're the little rewards. Okay, if you buy the next book, you're gonna find out what happens. You read the next chapter, you're going to find out what happens. It's really, really important. And you need to do this. And that was what we were talking about with Amazon and Vella, that if you have only 3 chapters, it's a perfect example. Is your scene tight? Is it working at all? If it is not, then that's it's a perfect opportunity to go back and find out why. And that's why we have this editing sessions here, is to, have the discussion with your editor. Okay, well, what's working, what's not working? Not just did I get all my boxes ticked off, but did I engage my readers? Do they care at all? Why am I doing this? So making sure that we're going through all that, and it's so, so important to keep them hooked on. So you're working through these, and this is how you can do that. So I want to make sure that we're asking questions. Christine, if you want to wrap this up, I can also.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing about your final
Absolutely.
scene in the book. If you're writing a series, be very careful about the exit hook. So you want to leave enough time after the climax in the resolution to, instead of drawing the reader into the next scene, you're drawing them into your next book. But you have to answer the main story question. You cannot leave it, and you cannot leave an exit hook on a new topic. And I'll give you an example. I won't name the book, but I read a book where at the ending scene, two main characters, both women, both pregnant, in a major car accident. And from reading it, one of them died, but you don't know who. And I was so mad that I was forced to go and buy the next book to find out who died. And this is like the fourth, fifth book. I went on to Amazon and I read the free sample just to see who died. And I stopped reading that author, and I've never bought another book from them because I thought, it's not fair. I want this book to be I don't want the ending to be, I got to buy another book. No, it's a standalone story. Because people like me get emotionally attached. And when
I thought it was a great idea. Then you're like, and I never bought a book again. I'm like, wow, okay.
No, but you know what? I felt like it was a trick, and the reader didn't deserve it. It was disrespectful of the readers to introduce a major, and when you fall 4 or 5 books in, and you kill off but you don't know who, you think, well, that's not fair to the reader. And so you always have to respect the reader and need to be careful in a series that you don't alienate the reader like happened to me.
And I'm wondering about that because I was, now that you mention it, like there's also been that on some other books and some series. And I never thought about it in that way because, I just assumed, well, I have to wait till the next season or whatever, till the next one comes out. But you're right. I've been frustrated and like not as excited to read or watch as much as just needing, and then okay, they're not as good anymore.
Remember, it's different with this series. Like with Netflix, you're paying for your Netflix subscription, and so you're just going to wait until the next thing comes out because that's Netflix. That's the way you do. It's not like now I have to go and buy another book, right? I've already paid for Netflix. I'm going to continue to pay whether I watch the show or not. I'm going to watch some other show. So it's a different feeling there. So hook on a series. Netflix is different than in a book where you put so much time and effort into one thing.
Well, and I think it's because it is personal. You bought from this author. You chose to follow them. And but that's a very good point. Very good point. I think everyone will remember this story for sure. So we have the finals of our exit hook here. So creating our cliffhangers and walk us through this, please.
Sure. So, everybody knows what a cliffhanger is, and you can have small ones and big ones. A revelation. So this is something that's going to change the course of the story that either the reader or the main character didn't know ahead of time. A setback for the protagonist or the antagonist, and this is where we link back to our goals. And here, it'll add suspense because now the protagonist is either closer or farther away from the story goal, which means the antagonist is at the opposite of that. So there's tension there. Secrets are good. You can do like a piece of a secret, a hint of a secret. Everybody loves a little bit of a secret, or a secret that's like a revelation where it changes the course of the story.
Right.
Question left hanging that the reader wants to know the answer to, or an unexpected plot twist, because then the reader knows there's more of these coming too. So they're excited and engaged to read the book.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so important. If you can map these out, if you can map them out ahead, then you strategically can place those little tidbits to keep them coming. Whereas, if you have to add them on the end, it may or may not be fulfilling to the reader, because your true fans, they'll remember exactly who was where, when, and if you get out of chronological order or you get a detail wrong, they're the first ones that come up. It's really super important. I love it when you have a good fan base, because they keep you accountable but it's also quite dangerous. It was a big thing I read about Game of Thrones. There was, the people who were actually helping. There was the fan base were part of when they took it from the book to the series online. Is that they were there saying, well, when this happened, I was watching for this, and they gave a whole different way of evaluating the whole storyline. And they went from just being fans to actually being involved in the creation of this whole movie series, which was really amazing. So it's so important to place it ahead. But the master designers, the master writers who really have that full background, the full character development, the full world building, all of those different things, and the full story arc of the chapter and the character and the book and the series and their career, it's all there. So it's all strategically played out for us. So we are open to questions now. We're doing very well on time today. And I just want to remind you before we go into this that we also have the webinar number 4, and it will be hosted by Christina in 1 week. It's how to edit. Yes, next week. How to edit your book like a professional editor. So it's either do it yourself or do it for you. And we'll talk about, how all of these things tie up together and how it works so that we can do this for you again and again. But again, folks, it's just so important for you to, the more you know, the better you will become, not only as a writer, but also a self-editor. And that really allows you to have an intense and productive conversation with your editors. So you will be editing at some point. You will either be doing a developmental edit, which is what we're talking about right now, or you'll be moving along to a line edit or a copy edit before you go out the door. And it's so important to understand how these fit in. So let me check if we have any questions or comments.
I think as we were going through, as I was just watching
a little bit. Yeah, we're good. We're good. Yeah. Excellent. So I just want to thank everyone for attending today. Make sure you sign up. Make sure you follow, click, and get the notices for the YouTube. And if you have any specific questions or needs from us, please let us know. I see a lot of new people signing in, and I'm wondering if the time zone difference has affected us a little bit. Here's a question for us. When do you know when you're at the scene's middle?
Okay, so here's how I do it in Fictionary. You can actually, I scroll the scroll bar down the side of the scene and I look for the middle there. So it's literally the same as when you look at your middle of your novel, when you're looking at the story arc, you look for the 50% mark and you're looking in there. And with a scene, it's the same thing. And so because Fictionary lays out per scene basis, you can use the scroll and just go halfway down and look somewhere in there for the turning point in the scene. And it should be, it's not exact. It's just generally in the middle somewhere. And that's where you look for your turning point. And if you don't have one, then you should write it in. And if you know what it is, you keep track of those. So you know that for every scene, you've got a turning point somewhere around the middle.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And this was just a comment here. It's all about how the trust develops between the reader and the author, and the reader begins to build the trust that the writer is going to guide them through a story. And that is your job. It is, you are dedicated to your readers and not to yourself. It all starts off as this wonderful endeavor that you're enjoying so much, but the truth is that your job is to take someone on this adventure with you. And I got a question here about the website. I just want to mention that.
Go ahead. I want to stop on Mark's comment.
Mm-hmm.
So Mark has just had a book come out. It's called The Conscious Thing. It's available on Amazon. He's gone I'm going to give a little bit of your story, Mark. He's self-published his book, and he's gone KDP Direct, so it's exclusive to Amazon right now. This book is the 3rd in a series, and Mark cares so much about his writers that what he's done, so he used Fictionary to edit his 3rd novel and decided he could do better on the first 2, and so he's re-editing them, and he's going to put up a 2nd edition just to be loyal to his readers who are following him. So we're following Mark's journey as we go on how he's doing this, because I think it's a really interesting thing that you have the luxury as a self-published author to do this, and you can continually make your books better. So just a little shout out to Mark there. Okay, you can go on, Joellen.
No, that's fine. That's really good. That's very good. I just want to answer this. And Rob, I'm going to come back to your question, so don't think we're ignoring you. I have a question here. A beta reader just suggested that I do a line edit first, and I was asking for structural feedback on this draft. I think this means she didn't like the writing. Should I ignore the suggestion? No. And I want to adjust this one here because sometimes it's making sure that the language and the syntax in that is clear enough that we can get to the actual story. And there can be challenges there. This happens if you know, English is a second language, or you're new to writing, or, you know, just whatever it may be in life. But it can be that you're not ready for the structural one because we don't have all those blocks filled in, and we need to be able to really understand what you're trying to convey first. Mm-hmm. That being said, and I think, Christina, you did a wonderful job at this before, is you've got this graphic that, you know, editing is circular. It's not linear. You don't start at one, and it's not even, I often use this funnel idea of a developmental line and content and whatever, but it doesn't work like that. You know, sometimes you start something and you have to do the line edit first, so it's really clear, and then you come back and you do the developmental edit because that's where you are. And it's well worth listening to it. But if you're getting feedback like that, you know, I would go to an editor and ask them what they think rather than a beta reader. But, you know, it's not without reason, I'm sure. And I wouldn't disregard it. Go ahead.
But wait, there's more. Firstediting.com, Dwellin's company, they do free samples. So yes, you can get an honest feedback on a sample of your work to see, and then you know if you should ignore the suggestion or not. Like it will cost you nothing. Submit a free sample and you'll get a recommendation, and her editors know how these things work and where you're at as a writer, and can help you with that. And as a minimum, you'll get some great valuable advice from a professional. So there's no harm, no commitment.
No. And the reason why we do it is because, you know, editing is based on a couple of factors. It's based on where you are in your writing, where you are in the process of editing, and what your needs are. And that can be, you know, from the syntax to the developmental, whatever it is. So once you can see the entire manuscript, then of course we can give you a much, much better feedback than a generic one. So again, we don't have your manuscript in front of us, but from that, I'm going to guess that you probably shouldn't ignore it, but go ahead, get a free sample. We'll help you out and give you a better answer. So Rob, on to your question. Given what Christina said, how does one leave a character arc item open in a series without setting fans off?
Oh, that's a good question.
I like the picture, by the way.
Keep me happy. Excellent question. So with that, when you're doing your story edit, I always recommend you have a blurb written. And the blurb says, who's the protagonist, what's their main story goal, and what's at stake if they don't achieve the story goal. And, you know, it doesn't have to be a perfectly written blurb, but those three things keep you focused on your story. And so when you get to the end of the character arc, have you answered the main story question, yes or no? Right? And if the protagonist didn't achieve that main story goal, were there strong consequences and dire consequences? Or if they did, then you want a bit of a resolution. And then what you don't want to do is introduce something that basically is a blurb for another book. So if you think you've put something in at the end of the book that you could write a blurb that this is going to be the next story, it's too much for that book. So the blurb is a really useful tool for assessing this.
Exactly. So let me see here. Mark is excited. He got his mention. And will there be a handout? I haven't received one from the previous two sessions. Let me look into that. Yes, we will. I'll put a link up on a page where you can download them. That'll be the easiest one. And then you can just get the PDFs there. And I love this one. Rob's speaking here. Frodo didn't get the ring to Mordor until book 3. Harry didn't defeat Voldemort until book 7. One needs to have the ability to leave these things open. No?
Yes, absolutely. But if you look at the ending of those books, they answered the blurb question for that book. and didn't start a new one. And the overall series goal is, so there's one big series goal that's out there with the series, and that does not have to be answered in a book, and it shouldn't be, right? But you do need to finish the story for each book.
Exactly. Okay, how big is the sample? It's normally it's like a page or two. We basically go in, show you the what level of editing we recommend based upon what we see in there. Depending upon how involved they are in the book, they may give more or less. We'll show you, what level we recommend and why. And then, of course, if you want to go higher than that, you can, but we don't really allow anybody to order. If we say that you need line editing, we're not going to provide you with copy editing because it's not going to fulfill your needs, and it's going to make us look bad as editors that we didn't provide what you needed. So that's a disservice to both you and especially to us, because we offer satisfaction guarantees. And guess what? If somebody says, oh, you should have got this edited, then we get blamed for it. So we don't do that. So we got to make sure. So we'll tell you what you need and why, and we'll also give you a price quote so you can see that, and a delivery time frame, and all those other things. And there's a lot of information there. But the sample, if you send us your full manuscript, we'll give it back to you, and it's a couple thousand words. What is it? Yeah, it's fine. Off the top of my head, depends on your editor. So wrapping this up, folks. Any last minutes? Thanks for answering my question. I'm new to writing. Is there a link to the free feedback? Yes. Let me see here. You can go to firstediting.com, and the first thing you're going to see is a link on there. Get a free sample. Oops. And that is where we go.
Yeah.
I think we're good. And again, go to Christina. What we're working with is a software that's created by Fictionary. And there's a story coach for the editors, which we're using in the background. We're all certified. It's over 50 hours we went through for extra certification to use this top of the high-tech, super-duper software that makes us very proficient and comprehensive as editors. But if you'd like to do it yourself, you can definitely do it on Storyteller, or you can actually sign up and even take the full course, which is pretty cool. And very intense. So thank you all for joining us today. Please follow along on Eventbrite and YouTube. Christina, thank you for joining us again. And we'll see you next week, and you'll be hosting.
Yeah, I'll try and come and not be blurry. That'll be my goal. My own personal goal is not to be blurry next week.
All right, folks. Thank you for joining us, and we've had a great time, and we'll see you again next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And